Story 1. Hold your phone in front of your mouth and speak into it while riding public transport. Story 2. Subscription services used to be rare. Now, everything from software to toothbrushes charges a monthly fee. Story 3. Being available 24/7 is something I actually dislike. I especially don't appreciate it when work calls or messages me during my personal time, even though it's usually just inquiries about a shift or similar matters. Story 4. Talking to yourself in public is often perceived as someone talking on the phone with their earbuds. However, if I had seen that behavior in the 1990s, I would have thought the person was crazy. Story 5. Watching anime or Asian TV shows in the United States. As a child, people thought I was unusual, and now everyone is into it. Story 6. In the United States, I am not sure about other locations, but some people do not get married in a church or synagogue or by a member of the clergy. I mention this as a layperson who has officiated 2 weddings in the last 10 years, one for a sibling and one for a very close friend. Story 7. When the internet first started, the safety rules were to never give out your real name, never meet a stranger in person that you just know from the internet, and never let a stranger take you to another location. Now we use internet-based apps to call strangers, usually giving them our real name in the process, so they can meet us in person and take us in their cars to another location. And we pay them for it. Was the former advice somewhat paranoid? Perhaps. But the transition from those guidelines to utilizing strangers' cars as a service was significant. Story 8. Posting on the internet for attention was once seen as unusual. Now you're considered unusual if you're not posting. Story 9. Totally shameless lying. I don't mean exaggeration or distortion. I mean confidently asserting fabricated nonsense. When you are comprehensively rebutted, it is clear that you do not care. Story 10. As a child, I remember a school shooting when I was around 6 to 8 years old. The only photo of the shooter on the news was a selfie. I distinctly recall my parents saying something like, "You can definitely tell something was wrong with him. He didn't have any friends to take photos with." That was over 20 years ago. Story 11. I always liked the idea of not talking to strangers, but now it seems to have turned into inviting a stranger to your house, getting into their car, and letting them drive you around. Story 12. Colorful dyed hair. I'm in my 30s and dyed my hair constantly in high school and was teased for it. Now, all those girls who bullied me dye their hair fun colors. These days, I notice colorful hair in many everyday settings, like hotel receptionists, nurses, waiters, and more. It's refreshing to see people expressing themselves, and I hope those girls from high school have matured and become more tolerant. I'll also mention tarot. I grew up in what would be classified as a superstitious household that practiced some folk magic, so I got into tarot at a young age. I would do readings for people in high school, and as a consequence, I was called a witch in a derogatory sense, threatened to be burned at the stake, and faced all that drama. Now I see tarot imagery everywhere. In stores, tattoos, earrings, t-shirts, you name it, it's all around us. I don't know how to feel about it, to be honest. It's like being the weird kid is now cool and trendy, and I feel somewhat territorial because I was made fun of. At least people are having fun, so I can't be too upset. Story 13. Listening to music on your phone without headphones has become common since the headphone jack was removed, and many people seem unconcerned about it. Story 14. Self-help gurus and other misleading salespeople offering a 10-step plan to get rich through dropshipping would have been an embarrassing way to make a living even 5 years ago. Story 15. The perception of what fat is has changed significantly in the past 20 years. People are generally larger than what was considered fat 2 decades ago. Characters or individuals who were labeled as fat back then do not appear as large by today's standards. Some of this change is positive, as we have pushed back against unrealistic standards from the past. However, it can also be negative as obesity has become a major issue, and our perception of what is normal may have shifted too far in the opposite direction. Story 16. Wearing pajamas in public is not advisable. Taking dogs everywhere you go is a no-go. I agree about engaging with strangers. I've never used a rideshare service for this very reason. I'm too old to change now. Story 17. Mental illness is significant, and its effects should not be diminished. However, I have heard people say things like, I am bipolar, so I am not responsible for the things I say, as if it is a free pass from accountability. Story 18. People are not dressing appropriately for interviews. The number of individuals I see come in for interviews is astonishing. Who raised these people? Story 19. Having someone you don't know and who has no connection to the establishment deliver your food seems way too trusting to me. Story 20. Electing felons and witnessing 4 to 7 headlines daily that could end a political career leads to inaction. Continuous sensational news has become the norm. Story 21. The trend of having friends organize celebrations for personal milestones has become quite common, especially for weddings and children. In the past, there was typically just a bridal shower and a wedding. Now, couples host engagement parties, dress-fitting parties, bridesmaid gatherings, the bridal shower, and sometimes even additional girls' weekends, as well as stag nights and boys' trips prior to the wedding. Guests often bear the financial burden and are treated poorly, sometimes even required to wear unflattering attire. Additionally, new parents often rely on their friends for support regarding their children. In a few years, it may become normal for parents to request contributions for their child's college expenses instead of traditional gifts. I even heard of one woman who asked guests to contribute $5 each so she and her husband could add an extension to their deck. Story 22. Lots of tattoos. People seem to be more forgiving of individuals who do not understand the difference between their, and their, as well as your and your. In my era, you would have been ridiculed for writing that way. Story 23. Making your emotions a problem for everyone else is not acceptable. Learn to manage your own feelings. They are not the responsibility of others. To us, you appear as a non-player character, and we have no obligation to cater to your needs. Story 24. It's endless. Believe it or not, there was a time when using a mobile phone in public while on a call was frowned upon. This was before mobile phones became universally owned. Another example is when wireless earbuds were first released. People mocked them for looking unusual. Now, it is the norm, and those with wired earphones seem somewhat out of place. I highly recommend watching this. Story 25. Science denial is prevalent. Everyone has their own opinion about how various topics function. As long as they believe they have figured it out or have read some headlines, they hold firmly to their beliefs. Story 26. Having hundreds of incomplete shows presented to us all the time, often without a guarantee of completion, makes it unwise to start a new show until it has completed its first few seasons. There are too many other things to watch. I truly believe that the endless supply and demand for entertainment has had a significant impact on our lives. Story 27. Contemporary slavery and servitude involve non-ownership and forced rental or subscription models for work and daily life. It presents itself as affordable freedom, but it actually creates enforced dependency and addiction. A new class system emerges based on the false notion of avoiding the hassle of ownership, while the reality is that wealthy owners control us. Story 28. Foot fetish community. As someone who is interested in feet, I am glad that this is less of a negative stigma and more accepted. Story 29. Selling phones without accessories. Using simple expressions like okay and fine instead of fully expressing ourselves. Yelling at our children, being overly controlling. Conversations with your partner often only revolve around, how was your day? Consuming saturated fats such as butter, cheese, and oils, then wondering why we face health issues in our 40s and 50s. The same applies to sugar, found not only in sweets but in many processed foods. Doctors prescribing medication without seeking the root cause of symptoms. There is great respect for the medical field, but it is puzzling that after so many years, the focus often remains on treatment rather than understanding causes. Remaining in a relationship where meaningful communication is lacking solely for the sake of the children. Some people may be a good fit for a limited time, but that doesn't imply a failed relationship. Both men and women sometimes forgive themselves for crossing boundaries due to low self-esteem and fear of starting over or being single. Engaging in conversations with strangers feels strange and awkward now. Not long ago, it was normal to discuss news, weather, or everyday topics with someone in public spaces like trams, on the street, or in parks. Story 30. Online therapy. Mental health support through video calls or text initially felt impersonal, but it is now a widely accepted method for receiving assistance. Story 31. Not wanting kids. Our parents often ask, "You're not having kids? Why not?" Meanwhile, they are complaining about the cost of living, food, internet, cars, healthcare, and basically every bare necessity going up. If I can't afford to support myself, I certainly can't support a child as well. Additionally, many people are choosing not to drink alcohol anymore. I asked several classmates before I graduated if they planned to drink after turning 21, and about 35% said they didn't want to, including myself. Story 32. Getting into strangers' cars can be risky. It reminds me that hitchhiking used to be common. Story 33. People walking around in public either half-naked or wearing pajamas are likely noticed by most. Story 34. Wearing headphones that resemble electric toothbrushes in your ear. I still think it's unusual. Story 35. Watching and enjoying anime certainly wasn't considered a cool activity when I was growing up. Now, everyone can name at least 3 without thinking too hard about it. Story 36. Selfies. I think about this often. I can still remember at 35 when it was considered embarrassing to take a picture of yourself. I also cannot comprehend when it became normal to take pictures in bathrooms, especially in front of toilets. I understand that bathrooms sometimes have nice lighting, but that's still a picture of where you relieve yourself. Story 37. The Soviet Union disintegrated, and some of the richest men in the world are gangsters who seized various parts of the national economy as it was privatized. Meanwhile, the Russian successor state pursues a foreign policy similar to that of the communists. Story 38. Hanging up on people was once seen as incredibly rude, but now, with non-stop spam calls, it has become a natural reflex. Story 39. 30 years ago, it would have been unusual to buy something from a company and then allow that company to continue to control what you paid for. It also would have been strange to have so many companies that do not take input from their customers. This is just an old man's opinion. This situation may be normal now, but it should feel odd. Story 40. Wearing clothes made of the American flag, such as bikinis, was not weird but felt almost sacrilegious. Story 41. It's all been said. However, one thing I wish society would normalize is having only one child. Everything is geared toward the 2-child family. Story 42. Non-walkable metropolitan cities have supermarkets compared to many specialty shops. Living comfortably without the need for in-person interaction is possible, with access to all of human knowledge readily available to anyone. Story 43. Crop tops are great. However, as a woman who grew up in the 90s, I find it shocking to see someone under 20 wearing one. I'm glad body positivity has improved for younger generations. My experiences with an eating disorder from the 90s still linger. Cheers to those who embrace their bodies. Story 44. Hippie medicine. People dismissed hippies, saying not to take drugs and to do it naturally. Nowadays, if you have Alpha Brain, Goop, Aaron Rodgers, or whatever Shailene Woodley promotes regarding eating and drinking clay, it's widely accepted. Story 45. In my day, there was one child with an allergy to something. Now, all children are allergic to everything. I know it's because back then, they often did not survive infancy due to allergies, but it was still strange and has now become the norm. Story 46. My parents met on Yahoo Classifieds. They smiled at each other, and that was that. 23 years of marriage later, here we are. Story 47. Always having a communication device on you. In 1993, I bought a pager for work and carried it regularly. Now, I don't even go to the store without my phone in my pocket. Story 48. PC gaming. If you didn't have a console, you would be labeled a nerd instantly. Now, it is much more normalized. Story 49. Wearing a mask when you are not feeling well helps protect others. Additionally, wearing a mask before your upcoming vacation ensures that you do not get sick. Story 50. Tattoos, gauged earlobes, and body modification in general are significant topics for discussion. Additionally, being transgender is a vital aspect of identity. My son is transgender, and I was genuinely worried when he told me because I grew up ridiculing people like that. I am not proud of this and have since become quite the opposite. I acknowledge that I was a product of my environment. Anyway, I am very glad that these differences are now more accepted. Story 51. Identifying as an animal. When I was younger, I never even heard of it being a thing. I think you would have received serious mental health intervention back then. But now, it's apparently considered normal, and if I think otherwise, I'm seen as the odd one. Story 52. The word goat used to mean the worst. Now it is used as greatest of all time. I still chuckle whenever I hear someone referenced as the goat. Story 53. Calling people weird is unkind. I once thought it was inappropriate to label others as strange, but now it seems normal to use such names. Story 54. Tattooing, piercings, and unconventional hair colors are becoming more common. Lingerie is often worn as outer garments. People are increasingly isolating themselves from society. Cross-dressing, gender transition, and drag culture have entered the mainstream. There is widespread use of recreational drugs, a significant rise in homelessness, and high incarceration rates, with many individuals facing repeated arrests for minor offenses. The list continues to grow. Story 55. 1. Hold your phone as if it is an ice cream sandwich you are about to take a bite of. 2. Hold a lavalier microphone with the windscreen in your kitchen up to your mouth as if it is a toy. Story 56. Sharing your phone number indiscriminately can lead to privacy issues. However, with phone numbers and messaging apps like WhatsApp, you can simply block contacts if they become problematic. Story 57. The world has people staring at a screen around the clock. This has led to a complete erosion of how humans are fundamentally socialized. It involves aggressive marketing strategies and manipulative applications. Story 58. Video editing with all pauses in narration cut out so that there is no silence can be frustrating at times. Story 59. Nowadays, it is better to buy an indie game than a AAA game that costs around 50 to 80 euros and provides fewer genuine emotions than an indie game. Story 60. Texting someone that you are at their house instead of going to the door, as well as texting someone before calling them. Story 61. Saying the same thing someone already mentioned in a conversation can be frustrating. I understand that not everyone reads every comment, but before posting, I performed a quick search to see if anyone else had already stated it. Imagine being at a party where someone approaches you and repeats, word for word, what your friend just expressed. It's absurd. Story 62. Honestly, selfies. I remember when Snapchat first came out around 2011, and my friend told me she saw someone taking pictures of herself making faces. My friend was so intrigued that she approached the woman and asked what she was doing. That became normalized very quickly thereafter. Story 63. Talking on the phone at the counter when you are at a restaurant or pharmacy shows a lack of phone etiquette in public in general. Story 64. Is it just me? Or does it seem like United States politics are becoming more divisive in terms of outright slander, backstabbing, corruption, and blatant lying about facts? I remember a time in my childhood when it seemed that regardless of which side of the political spectrum you were on, there was some bipartisanship. I might be completely wrong about this, but the blatant lying about facts, open corruption in Congress, and division in the House seem more prevalent since 2016. Perhaps as an adult, you tend to notice more of the outright dishonesty in life. Either way, the 2020s have been quite disappointing so far. Story 65. Tap and pay bank cards used to make me anxious when everyone started using them. Now, transactions do not require one-time passwords as much. On one hand, this is very convenient. On the other hand, you are just a tap away from spending your money, whether intended or unintended. Story 66. Gaming as an adult hobby. I feel that most people my age play video games, while adults when I was growing up treated it as if it were something only kids did and wanted nothing to do with it. Story 67. Microphones are everywhere. Even my TV remote has one. Cameras don't bother me as much as the conversations and how those conversations are being overheard more by artificial intelligence. Story 68. College students attending class in pajamas. I'm not upset. I just wish it had been a trend when I was in school. Story 69. Those haircuts where one side of the head is shaved while leaving the other side long and combed over the shaved part are perplexing. It makes me wonder why someone would shave part of their head if they intend to cover it up. Confuses me. After COVID-19, people return to public life with unconventional looks, as if their children drove them a bit crazy. Story 70. Believing in horoscopes. I firmly believe that we need to discourage belief in horoscopes and shame anyone who mentions them seriously. Story 71. Filming everything is now popular, with vlogging becoming the main topic of conversation. Unlike before, when you would be stared at like a mad person. Story 72. The concept of likes has changed. Nowadays, if you receive 50 to 100 likes on Instagram, it is considered a failure when in reality that is 100 people who liked your photo. Story 73. Not covering your mouth when you cough or calling in sick when you are clearly contagious shows a lack of consideration. It seems that most people are either aware of the risks associated with COVID-19 or have lost all sense of decency in this regard. It is one extreme or the other. Story 74. Vaping. When the first devices came out, they were seen as tragically lame, but it seems to have shifted, with many young people constantly using disposable vapes. Story 75. K-pop fans used to be bullied for their interest, but now most people are familiar with BTS and Blackpink. Additionally, it is increasingly common for K-pop groups to collaborate with Western artists these days. Story 76. BDSM, rape kink, swinging, and physically hurting women as a kink, such as slapping and choking, are things I will never get used to and will not normalize. Story 77. Buying everything online instead of going to the store is becoming more common, including ordering groceries. Story 78. I clearly remember how, before the smartphone era started, there was a phase called photo with outstretched hand. That meant that a person was 1, lonely because nobody was taking photos of them or with them, and 2, pathetic because they took photos by themselves, cropping out the corner where the viewer could see the outstretched hand. Every year, this phrase became more popular until the iPhone was released and the selfie trend emerged. Now, I can't find any mention of that phrase. Even when I ask myself, maybe it's a fake memory, though I clearly remember cropping out my photos before posting them online. Story 79. People in romantic relationships casually and comfortably have conversations with the opposite sex, whether in person or online, without any sense of restraint. This lack of boundaries is why some partners emotionally cheat without even realizing it. Story 80. Dichotomous judgments of normal flawed individuals, meaning someone makes a relatively minor mistake, or a television character is written as an anti-hero. I noticed that Generation Z tends to try really hard to determine whether someone is good or evil. The answer is often neither. The lack of nuance and forgiveness contributes to the extremism we are witnessing today. This is why Robert Downey Jr. would not have the opportunity to grow from his significant flaws in the current climate. Story 81. Being a delusional, bigoted person. It used to be unusual to see such individuals acting as they truly are. Common decency and shame have long disappeared, and now these people behave as if everything is acceptable. Story 82. In my state, constitutional carry has been passed, and it is now normal to see someone walking around with a gun on their hip. 25 years ago, this would have been unimaginable. However, since the law was enacted, crime rates have significantly decreased. While the same individuals may still be involved in shootings among themselves, they seem to have stopped shooting at others. Vehicle theft is not as common anymore. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.